Hello and welcome. I'm George Crump, lead analyst with Storage Switzerland. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar, we're going to talk about hyperscale data centers and what could be potentially a nightmare for them because of the common practice of using consumer-grade flash in these data centers. It's also appropriate for non-hyperscale data centers as well, as everybody tries to weigh the cost and potential of consumer-grade flash versus enterprise-grade flash. So we'll talk about the differences and how to kind of avoid some common mistakes we see in the enterprise. Joining me to help with the conversation, I've asked Sean Warsaw from OCZ to help me with the call. Sean, Jack, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me, George. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Also, everybody attending the webinar was promised a exclusive copy of Storage Switzerland's latest white paper, How the Hyperscale Data Centers Can Safely Lower Their Cost of Flash. That's available in the attachments section. You can download that anytime you want to.
Be on the lookout for polling questions. We have one in the deck here. You can ask questions at any time by clicking on the questions button. You can also feel free to tweet us questions at Storage Swiss on our Twitter handle. And then finally, at the end of the webinar, please rate it and provide a rating. There's a 5-star system, 5 being great, 1 being not so great. For myself, I'm the founder and lead analyst at Storage Switzerland. My areas of expertise include performance optimization, which is really what we're really focused on today, as well as data protection. I have a lot of papers and Chalk Talk videos available. Again, you can get all those on storageswiss.com. And also cover subjects like all flash arrays, solid state, and software-defined storage. Prior to starting Storage Switzerland, I was a CTO at a leading storage solutions provider and integrator, and designed storage solutions for data centers all across the United States. Sean, why don't you give folks some background on, some background on Storage Switzerland. We're an analyst firm, obviously focused on storage, cloud, and virtualization. We gain knowledge of these markets through a lot of work with suppliers, interaction with end users, as well as our own testing. You can find all the results of all that research in a variety of different formats: articles, videos, webinars, product analysis, case studies, thought leadership articles, everything. All is available on our site at storageswiss.com. Now, Sean, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Great. Thanks, George. Looks like you and I mistakenly used Nair as a hair care product back in our younger days, so there we are, two fine-looking gentlemen there. Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Warsaw, and I look after OCZ's SATA, enterprise SATA products, and as a director of product management. Prior to being with OCZ, I was with NVIDIA for many years, looking after the professional graphics aspect, primarily focused on notebooks, so mobile workstations. And it's always been interesting to see where the world continues to move, and everyone wants their data faster and faster. And so the transition into the storage industry and flash has been a great career move, and looking forward to continuing that and having discussions with you fine folks. I also like looking out at the Golden Gate Bridge, sailing on San Francisco Bay, snowboarding up in Tahoe, and doing a little bit of drumming now and then when I get some spare time. So I'll go back one, sorry. So OCZ Storage Solutions is actually a Toshiba company now. It's been a Toshiba company for over a year, and continue to focus on addressing enterprise and client products and solving challenges with innovative flash-based products. And we're fully integrated as a group company of Toshiba, have access to Toshiba's excellent NAND products, and with that, add in our own controller technology as well as firmware and software to enable leading world-class solutions in the solid-state drive industry. Thanks, George. I'll pass that back over to you now.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sean. Appreciate that. So let's go ahead and start with our polling question. How would you characterize your use of
SSDs in your company. So a couple of options here. Would you use only hard disk drives? Would you use, do you guys use enterprise grade SSDs, specifically designed for the data center? Do you use client or consumer grade SSDs? So basically systems that were designed more for desktops and laptops. And then, or finally, do you use both? A little bit, maybe a combination of consumer and enterprise grade SSDs. We'll let those results come in. All right, Sean, so looks like about 22% of the folks are only using enterprise grade, and about 67% are using both consumer and enterprise grade, and about 11% are using hard disk drives. Any surprises there as far as the polling results?
No, I don't think so, George. I think it's right in line with the topic that we're going to discuss today. So really understanding that there is a wide differentiation of use amongst the drives in the industry, and let's see if we can help guide them to using the right solutions for what they're doing today.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and stop the audience voting there. So let's first kind of talk about the state of the hyperscale data center. The hyperscale is sort of an interesting word for things nowadays, and I think the hyperscale can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But a common denominator that we see in these environments, Sean, is it's hyper-competitive, right? These are often web-based or online application type of businesses. And so, unlike just about anybody else's business, you can go look and compare very easily cost per month, cost per year, whatever, and people make a buying decision based on that. So it's critical for these type of data centers to really drive down cost and maintain, keep costs under control, but also to be able to provide a very positive experience. What else do you see as common attributes of a hyperscale environment?
Yeah, thanks, George. I think a lot of it's the volume deployment. I mean, hyperscale typically indicates that there's a large dispersal of storage globally, and through a number of data centers serving multiple languages around the world with similar data. And understanding the specific needs of all those companies, and as they scale those deployments out, obviously cost becomes very, very important. There's reasons why Nebraska is an excellent place to put a data center. Cost clearly is one of the main factors that drive the amount of servers that can be implemented to serve their data centers.
Yeah, exactly. So. And like I said before, one of the things that we see a lot of in these environments is also the demand to really meet a performance expectation while you're trying to meet this cost priority, right? Because again, it's relatively easy to switch services to go to somebody else, and if you're waiting for whoever online application you're using, the ability to kind of switch and do something else is pretty straightforward. It's not like you got to go buy another server, install a new application, reload code, do all that kind of stuff, right? So that the ability to be transient as a customer is pretty real that these guys have to deal with, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you use, let's say, Google or Yahoo as an example, both those guys are competing for clicks. And if you don't have an experience that you enjoyed, or it took too long, you think, to get the latest news article off Yahoo, then it's not going to take you much time to go and load up Google and try it there. And if your experience is better, then you just found a new company to work with. So I think all companies are cognizant of that now, and they realize that time is very important to any potential customer they have, and whether it's placing an order through eBay or again, looking through at your stock quotes on some other system, you want to have access to that data as quickly as possible. and you'll go searching elsewhere if you don't get satisfied quickly.
Exactly, exactly. So let's talk about that. So that struggle, if you will, between meeting a cost demand as well as meeting a performance demand really causes some challenges for these data centers, right? And so they have to make some compromises that might be somewhat uncomfortable, right? So one of those is using consumer-grade SSDs. So first, before we talk about kind of the advantages of consumer-grade SSDs, explain to the folks what we mean by consumer-grade SSDs, Sean.
Yeah, sure, George. Essentially, they're drives that were intended for client applications. Could be upgrading your notebook or your desktop computer, moving on from the hard drive days that you've recognized the benefits of faster access time by using solid-state storage. And most data centers at smaller companies, SMB type companies, they don't start off as intending to scale out to large proportions. You'll start out with one small server potentially and some storage arrays to go with that. And at that time, it might have been convenient to just pick up some of the same drives that you were potentially using for other members of your organization. If you're the IT manager, for example, or you drew the short straw that week in your small company to help everyone get their applications running, you upgraded their laptops, let's say, with solid-state drives, and so you had a box of those, and you put them into your hosting system. But as we know, things always tend to get larger, and as those continue to scale out, if you continue to try to use those same drives, client drives can come and go with the wind. I mean, it's the latest special you have at Fry's or wherever you buy your drives from. You may not be able to get the same drive that you had before. So typically then, once you get into those larger deployments, you have to make that decision. How am I going to grow my data center in a more economical way, or a way that I can actually manage it? And prior to some of the products that are in the market today, the next choice was going to enterprise drives, and those drives can be quite a bit more expensive than you're used to paying for your client drives. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about some of the challenges with using these consumer-grade drives. Obviously there's some performance difference in consumer-grade drives versus SSDs. There's some conditioning. We're throwing out some terms here that I'm not sure everybody might be used to. So one of the conditions is what we call FOB, or fresh out of the box, versus a steady state situation. So Sean, let's first talk a little bit about what does fresh out of the box mean versus when we get to steady state performance. Okay. Yeah, fresh out of the box is essentially what it means. You get the drive and you put it in, and it's a clean slate. And think of that as a brand new whiteboard in your office. It's nice and pristine, and you can put anything you want on as quickly as you can. But obviously, as that drive gets filled, then there needs to be certain housekeeping that goes on in order to make room and clean things up to make it ready to accept more data to write to it. And even the best solutions that you can square on that whiteboard, there's always remnants of the previous stuff, and so you can't quite fill it up as much or as quickly. You got to look for a little space, or someone's left "please leave" on, and you got to move around that. And so things start to slow down. And as a drive gets longer in its life, then the access times are much slower. And so in the enterprise space, we refer to more of a steady state or a sustained performance. And the whole purpose of that is designed to show the IT manager that as they get that deployment out and they know that the rest of the drives are all getting to a similar level, that they know exactly what the performance is going to be. There's not going to be the super slow drive that affects the overall latency of the entire platform, but they have a much better idea of the overall performance of that entire system based on the measured results at a sustained rate, as opposed to the super duper fast fresh out of the box. Yeah, and I think what we see here is, because of the way flash cells update,
that really impacts the difference here, because in a fresh out of the box, I don't have to, as you said, I'm using a clean slate, so I don't have to go back and erase cells before I write to them. And so for those on the phone that don't know, the way a flash device works is if there's old data in a cell, we have to erase it first before we rewrite it, and so that takes time. Well, in the fresh out of the box state, I don't have that. So until we fill the entire drive up, we never really know what real performance is going to look like, and that's what we determined to be steady state. The other thing is this sort of the flash controller technology, right? It's not something we deal with in a hard drive world. There's another layer of intelligence that comes on every SSD that really affects performance to some level, right? The flash controller can manage wear leveling. It can manage how the cells are provisioned. And over-provisioning is setting aside some cells so we can have a larger area to level against and extend the life of the system. And so the challenge with those is that takes power, right? That takes time, and the capabilities of the flash controller do make a difference in this world. And a consumer grade, Sean, I would assume that, I think it's fair to assume that a consumer grade flash controller isn't really tuned to do the type of things that an enterprise grade flash controller. There's probably a difference between those two, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that could be just the cost of the controller itself. Obviously, for a client drive, cost is paramount, and you know, a lot of the features that you're going to get in an enterprise class drive are not being utilized in a client drive, and so a lot of that, George, comes back to the actual firmware or the hard-coded software that's in the drive itself. That its whole purpose in life is to manage that individual drive and to ensure that it's looking after the man the best way it can. It's understanding when blocks have been written to more than others and can reassign where that data is going to get stored. So it's think of it as like a brain of the drive itself, and the amount of intelligence that you add to that through the experience of, for example, our firmware developers certainly spend years ensuring that they've got the right code base, the right balance to get the performance and the overall endurance that ensure that the drive lasts for the amount of time it's intended to, and can facilitate the workload required by it. And that can go into the number of complete drive write today that is enabled with the amount of the quantity and the caliber of the flash that's included. So really it comes down to that the more you're going to invest into the controller, the better overall performance and experience you can expect out of the drive itself.
Exactly. Yep, that's true. So the other concern, obviously, in a consumer-grade drive is reliability. Most consumer-grade drives have little to no protection for data that's in flight, and so let's talk about what that means. So as your application writes data, or whatever you're using writes data, and it gets ready to go to be written in the flash cells, that flash controller process is happening, and things have got to work to be able to prep the cell to actually accept the data. Well, if you lose power in that particular moment in time, you can lose data. You can cause maybe potentially data corruption. That happens because the application thinks that it wrote the data when it actually didn't get written, so that obviously can cause a challenge. This corruption could also impact metadata, which means you could lose sort of drive mapping and things like that. And the whole thing really can lead to a total drive failure. And that really causes some challenges as you're trying to move into sort of an enterprise environment. As we said in the beginning, you've got these two offsetting challenges. One is I got to hit a cost number, and the other is I got to deliver a performance experience that my users are going to like. Well, if I can't balance those and kind of rationalize them, that really becomes a problem. And if you have failed systems, it becomes even harder to hit those performance expectations. Sean, anything else in the reliability area we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you've made a huge investment in the data that you've created, and you want to protect that data. And to ensure that it's there every time you go to access it, it would be paramount for anyone who's looking after the company crown jewels, for example. So definitely that falls into the play of more of a full-scale enterprise database. And you'd want to have as much potential protection as possible. And so using full power loss protection, there's internal capacitors that hold up the drive long enough to ensure that all in-flight data is written to that drive prior to the power going down. Conversely, on the other end, on the enterprise side, where you may not have any of that type of protection, if the power goes out, it's going to be whatever state it was in when it went off. And if it was in an unhappy place, then and we're going to cover that in a few minutes, George. Potentially that drive turns into a brick, and you can't even access your data again. And it only takes a couple of those experiences for you to realize that you might want to invest in a little bit better technology just in case the power does go out.
Yeah, well, and let's kind of talk about that now. Because one of the things I do here when I talk to not only hyperscale guys, but just regular data center guys is, hey, as long as the drive's under warranty, who cares? It's protected. I think to some extent that's a fair comment. But the problem is that there's a whole lot of work that goes involved when a drive does fail. Obviously you've got to do some sort of data protection rebuild, typically a RAID rebuild or erasure coding rebuild. Now again, in Flash that's less of an issue because it happens so quickly. But you do have the maintenance issue. Somebody has to go and typically pull the drive out. They have to pull the right drive out. I don't know about you, Sean, but I've seen many times where the wrong drive was pulled and then really, really bad things happen. And that just impacts IT's productivity, right? I mean, we're talking about an environment that's rated very carefully on their ability to cost effectively deliver a product. Well, if you have to have a guy that roams the rack rows looking for failed drives, that's probably not the most effective use of his time. And so that just really means a lot more work for the IT people, and eventually that just ends up costing the company money. And then there will come a point, typically we've seen, where a vendor will say, look, you're just not using these drives correctly, and we're not going to keep replacing them for free for you. And so eventually you either have to pay to have them replaced, or you'll be forced to upgrade to a more enterprise class type of system. Do you guys find similar challenges with these failed drive situations?
Well, sure. I mean, if an enterprise class drive, you can definitely go back to the vendor and they would be under warranty. Warranty period for our drives, for example, all of our enterprise class drives are 5 years. So, we'll definitely look after you every time. But if you get into a situation where you bought a box of drives from off eBay or you went down to Fry's and picked them up, the warranty period is typically much less for those. Our client drives actually have a pretty substantial warranty with them, but there's a lot of other ones that do not, and even trying to go back and replacing them can be difficult. But I think one of the other items you mentioned, George, imagine continue patrolling on the up and down the racks to see which ones have little red lights on them. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. And if you're in a smaller dispersal, that's fine, where it's sitting on your desk, or you have easy access to it, and you just pull one out and pop in another one, that's fine. But once you start to scale out to larger deployments, it really becomes more prohibitive. And so you find in some of the main enterprise database, they don't take out single drives. They'll take down a whole rack. They'll look at how many lights are blinking the right way and the wrong way, and then they'll make a determination that that whole block goes offline. So they've lost that entire stack. But most likely they have it replicated elsewhere. So they have that ability to do that. But then there's a whole cost in building out that type of a data center as well. So there's a lot of trade-offs that go in there, but making the trolling up and down the aisles to see which drives have failed really doesn't work very well. And I think that brings us to more of a, how do you manage these systems?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really kind of a big challenge, right? And one of the challenges that I see a lot, Sean, curious to get your comment on this, is that especially if you've made this kind of consumer drive strategy, or made it a strategy, is that it's really hard to get the same drive over and over and over again, right? And so consistency in dealing with that manufacturer and dealing with maybe the specific tools you need to maybe wipe the drive and manage the drive and things like that, they're all different. And so then you end up with, I've seen some hyperscale environments where they have, 8, 9 different SSD vendors that they're dealing with. That's frankly a lot of overhead that they have to deal with. So that really becomes a challenge. And then the other part of this is then you see sort of this mixed approach, which a lot of our folks were doing, where you have, enterprise drives from one vendor and then client drives from just a variety of different vendors that it's just, it's just this hodgepodge of things. Do you see that a lot in hyperscale data centers as well?
Yeah, I think as you get into the larger enterprise ones, George, they've got management, software management, and that's something we offer for all of our enterprise class drives as well. We have our Storage Peak 1000, which is designed to help the IT manager do it remotely from his desk. And without that capability, and if you, as you refer to, mixing and matching multiple vendors, it gets really difficult to try to manage those systems. And really understanding which server needs to be brought down for maintenance, which drives do you want to use to be in your database for more write-intensive applications, let's say. And maybe as those drives get a little longer in the tooth, get a little older, you want to switch those drives around and have them be let's say the company's the website, where data doesn't change very often. It's written to once and read many, many times. And so you've got that flexibility to move those drives around without physically removing anything. And we'll go back to one thing I mentioned earlier where, if you've got a couple of drives, if you're managing 2 or 3, that's no big deal. But when you start getting into the tens and the hundreds and potentially even the thousands in these larger deployments, you've got to have some kind of management tool in order for you to keep your sanity.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's also talk about the enterprise problem, right? Is that we can solve all of those problems by going to premium grade, top of the line enterprise drives and get rid of consumer grade drives altogether. But the challenge, of course, is going to be price there, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I don't want to be Mr. Anti-Enterprise Drive because clearly in the right environments, you've got to have them, but maybe not in every environment, right?
Yeah, that's right. And obviously what we want to provide our customers is the choice. We say it's black and white between, black being enterprise and white being client. But there's a huge scales of gray in between of, well, which one should I use for those potential applications, and how is the data being actually utilized? So I think you have to make the decision, especially as the crown jewels, the things that are important to your business. You've got to have that data protected as well as possible, and that includes having power loss protection in the drives and that enterprise capabilities that those drives have. And then as you get down the scale, it's like, well, how far down do I want to go for my web hosting and my email? I mean, that's pretty important stuff as well, and you might have that replicated elsewhere. But if there's a way to save some cost and get into more of that gray area type of drives that would be more suited for the hyperscale deployments, then those are options now. And so really, we ultimately want to give our customers the choice. They can mix and match and use as needed across their data centers and deployments, any type of our drives from client all the way up to the enterprise class.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think what we're kind of leading to here is that, we need kind of a different type of drive now, right? I think we've got the technology. I think a lot of the early push to enterprise drive was all driven by fear, right? And maybe not fear, but lack of familiarity with flash technology and SSDs. Now we're kind of trying to figure it out. Maybe we got too confident and went to consumer drives. And so I think something in the middle is maybe more appropriate, where we have a near price point to consumer drives with really consistent performance. So we're dealing with that kind of steady state type of performance. Have the built-in protection against drive failures, which is incredibly valuable. And then, really a type of environment where we're dealing with a vendor that's used to dealing with enterprises, not necessarily a vendor that's really known for mass market distribution and, being, if you can get it at Walgreens, I'm not real sure if you should be putting it into your data center. And so I think that, that's the combination that we need is those components. And obviously, Sean, that one of the reasons we invited you guys on this webinar today was you guys are really starting to address that market. So why don't you kind of give the folks some background behind this kind of new class of drive and where it fits?
Great. Thanks, George. Yeah, I guess that's not quite the best kept secret, is it? We've got a new class of drive that we've actually introduced to the marketplace back in the November time frame, and it's called the Sabre 1000 series. And this drive is intended for those gray areas to provide a drive that has the class of enterprise, but also at a more cost-effective, we'll call it an entry point into that enterprise applications. And really meant for the high volume of the deployments that we're looking at that really serve we believe is the hyperscale type of marketplace. I mean, really, these are applications where the majority of the activity on them is reading. You write once and read many, many times. And so whether that's the web page of your company that's on there, the data doesn't change much, but you're hoping a number of customers are going to be clicking on that and drawing the data from there on a regular basis. So really, this is the heart and soul behind the Sabre product, and we believe that it's got a great opportunity to serve some of the items that we were discussing earlier, George. You don't want to necessarily go all the way to the enterprise class, but at the same time, you'd like to be able to sleep at night and ensure that you know that your data is secure. And so the Sabre was born from that activity, and talked with many customers and really understanding what their needs are and what they're looking for in these larger deployments. And we'll cover some of the applications that this is well suited for in a few moments. But as we discussed, the weak link in your database is going to be the slowest drive. And so having that predictable and sustained performance as opposed to, well, what was it when I first plugged it in as a fresh out of the box experience, I think goes a long way to enabling an IT manager to understand the capabilities and any bottlenecks of their system. And so Sabre is all part of our enterprise portfolio. It also carries that 5-year warranty we discussed earlier. But this is what we want to stand behind. We believe that this is a great entry into our enterprise class products, which consist also of our Geneva and Intrepid lines as well in the SATA, enterprise SATA space. And really, the whole idea is to address, 70% we believe the deployments are essentially read-intensive applications. And that bodes well for where the volume is going in solid-state drives. And also, we've introduced the largest capacity to date of our enterprise SATA solutions, coming in at 960 gigabytes, which is essentially a terabyte of raw storage space. Let me go into a little bit more details on the Sabre drive itself. The feature sets of the Sabre 1000. Again, we've got 960, and we also have 3 other capacity points as well. We understand that some deployments would rather have fewer drives and fewer servers, but they still need a certain amount of capacity, where other ones don't necessarily need that kind of capacity volume. And so we go down to a 120 gigabyte option as well on the Sabre series. So these fall in line, George, with a lot of the existing capacity points today on the client drives. So having that capability to go, all right, this is what I've been using, and I can now move forward with more of an enterprise class drive and still understand my capacity requirements. And so what we do is we've leveraged our Barefoot 3 controller. This is a product that we've had, and we've put many, many years of firmware development into this controller. And all of the firmware that goes into it is in-house and designed to work directly with Toshiba's NAND flash. And so Sabre 1000 actually leverages the latest A19 nanometer flash that we're using, and we look forward to continuing with that on a number of other products as well. One of the aspects we covered was that fear of a power outage, and no one expects a power outage. That's why it's called an unexpected power outage. So when that happens, you want to make sure that you've got some kind of reliability built into the drive itself that can ensure that the drive will come back up after a power failure has occurred. And so we've implemented what we call Power Failure Management Plus, and essentially this takes a metadata log of where the drive was at the last moment prior to the power going out. So when power is safely restored, it can resume exactly where it was without any loss of data. This does not protect, say, against in-flight data loss. That's where full power loss protection comes into play. But that's also additional cost, and that's what we feature in our Intrepid class of enterprise drives. We've been able to fit Sabre into a thin form factor. It's a 7mm height case and the standard 2.5-inch SATA enclosure. Low power is obviously another item that IT professionals are going to be looking into as they deploy larger and larger data sets and servers, etc. Power becomes a big requirement, and everyone wants to go green. And having a lower power, at least under 5 watts for sure, it really helps when you have to scale up the size of those data centers. And so all those big factors come into play as you're scaling that out. And anywhere you can save money on energy and cooling costs, that's why I believe SATA is still around for quite a long time in these hyperscale markets, as opposed to maybe the more higher energy drawing PCIe solutions that we're also seeing in the marketplace today. Storage Peak 1000 is our database management system. It allows you to manage all aspects of any of our enterprise class products, including our PCIe Z drive family of products. And you can have that access across your entire data center using all the OCZ enterprise class products. And this really gives you the capability, as I mentioned earlier, to move data around, to move the functionality around what the actual system's being targeted for down to the individual drive level. And as I mentioned before, all of our enterprise products, including Sabre 1000, come with a 5-year warranty. And this is just a high-level overview of some of the applications that we believe Sabre 1000 is ideally going to serve. Obviously, new applications get created every day, but this is at a high level at least represents the types of applications, whether that's caching or in the whole cloud infrastructure, virtual tape libraries, your front-end web server, and a host of other items there that would be ideally serviced by the Sabre 1000 class of product. And as these deployments get larger and larger, the data center comes down or you have to do it for maintenance, you can have the confidence that you've got that same capability to bring up the entire server again quickly when let's say a power outage occurred, that it's replicated very easily with our Power Failure Management Plus capabilities. So we think that Sabre 1000, George, is a great drive to fill in that gray area between enterprise and client, and giving our customers another option to choose from.
Yeah, that sounds good, Sean. Thanks very much for that overview. Appreciate that. So let's see. Before we get to the questions, just a couple of reminders. First of all, the attachments button in kind of the middle of your player there has the white paper that we promised people, and then a bunch of other different things. There's a couple of product briefs on the from OCZ on the products, as well as a couple articles from us where we kind of cover different issues related to hyperscale data centers. So feel free to access those as you want to. And then also as a reminder, a on-demand version of this webinar will be available about 5 minutes after we finish today's webinar, and you can get to that by going to our website and clicking on the webinar button. And then once you've logged in, you can access any of our webinars without any problem at all. So feel free to use those as you see fit. So Sean, if you are ready, let's kind of knock out a couple of questions here and see what we can do.
Sure, George.
Let's see. First question is that you had mentioned 2 OCZ enterprise SATA drives. What's the main difference between these two, the Intrepid 3000 and the Sabre 1000?
Okay, that's a great question, George. Sabre 1000 essentially was designed, as I mentioned, specifically for these more of the entry-level or data center class products. So really, they're read-intensive applications. You know, the workload for enterprise, hyperscale, cloud. That's really what it was designed for, is to fill that niche. And whereas the Intrepid 3000 series is really our full-scale enterprise class product, and they're designed more for the higher endurance data centers, mixed and write-intensive application workloads, also in the enterprise, hyperscale, and cloud. Really, the full focus of Intrepid 3000 is really for that data that you've got to know that it's there, whether that's a banking environment. I sure want to know that my Swiss bank account was secure with an enterprise class product in it, holding all the right down to the little nickels and dimes and all the pennies as well. We've got two products that are in the Intrepid series. We've got the Intrepid 3600, and that's really more focused on the read-intensive mixed workloads, where you're still going to be doing quite a bit of writing. Whereas the Intrepid 3800, it's got 4 drive writes per day, and it's designed much more for the write-intensive mixed workloads.
Okay. So let's talk about sudden power failures, Sean. You know, I wrote a piece on this a couple of years ago, and there was a test, and I can't remember which university did it. It was probably Berkeley or something like that, but they had done a bunch of testing where they were writing data to drives, and then, you know, in the most impolite fashion possible, just removed power from the system, and then tested those drives for you know, usability afterwards, and data corruption and drive failure and things like that. And the failure rate back then was very high, and this was, you know, typically mostly client drives. It was really before the whole enterprise drive technology had figured itself out. And now, though, those days are, for the most part, I think, gone. We've done a lot of things to protect against sudden power failures. What specifically are you guys doing in the Sabre 1000 to address this?
Yeah, that's a good question, George. I mentioned earlier, there's many different ways to protect against power loss and data loss, where, you know, the full power loss protection, obviously there's a little more cost involved in that. There actually has to be what we call these supercapacitors in there that have the capability to hold the drive up long enough so that all the data that was in flight, which was acknowledged by the drive back to the host, makes its way into the drive itself. Whereas Sabre, we looked at how do we still maintain the most important thing, that your drive doesn't turn into a brick and you can access the data ultimately when the power does come back up. But how can we do that more intelligently? So rather than just managing a power failure, we implemented Power Failure Management Plus. So there is actually some additional circuitry on the drive itself in Sabre that you know, allows it long enough to ensure that the integrity of the device can be operational again once power is restored. And so each of the Sabre SSDs, they have an internal small log, a little 16-byte log that describes a single action that was performed on the NAND. And this log contains just the essential data needed to rescue the SSD from any emitted corruption. So as a result, all these logs are accumulated and saved frequently with no impact to the overall performance. You know, essentially, as most enterprise and hyperscale data centers are deployed in clusters, this Power Failure Management Plus technique actually ensures that once the power is restored, the cluster is stable again, and all the SSDs will return back to the condition they were at the time of the failure. So not full power loss protection, but we believe that it's at a level that's certainly much better than what a potential client drive could get you.
Okay. So let's talk, you know, we're kind of guilty sometimes, I think, a lot of talking about workloads sort of generically in IT circles. And so here's a question that came in that I think is pretty interesting. What do you mean by enterprise workloads when you're talking about the best use case for drives like the Sabre 1000?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's an ideal combination of performance and capacity. That's what I think you're looking for, the sweet spot of what is your data center, your cluster going to need. And you know, Sabre is essentially optimized for those types of applications that get a lot of storage space, but they don't necessarily get written to very often. And so this type of application is referred to more as a read-intensive, as we were calling it out earlier. And these type of workloads are the read cache, indexing servers, web servers, content management, cloud storage, multicast applications such as streaming media. You're going to download from Netflix, video on demand, etc. Basically anything that you've got an application that you need the base function there all the time. The writing to it might be a smaller portion of it, and that gets saved elsewhere. Customer relationship management, CRMs, enterprise, content management, etc. So there's a large variety of these applications that really are read-intensive and really focused on what Sabre 1000 Drive can assist you with.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you look at this, there's some interesting use case, and I know we're probably not there yet, but it'd be interesting to see some of the storage system manufacturers start to adopt this, because some of these guys, the hybrid guys, for example, have the ability to already, manage how data is written and moved around. Be interesting to see them put in a enterprise class, shock absorber, so to speak, and then as data ages and settles down a bit, move it to this type of a drive for long-term storage. That would allow a hybrid vendor to really hit a whole different price point than what these guys have been after in the past. So maybe there's some hybrid guys on the line that should be talking to you guys, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We've got account managers standing by, operators standing by to assist you now. So call now, and I don't think we have any state.
Here's another good one. I've never used enterprise SSDs in my servers. That's kind of interesting. And I'm not having any problems. And the question here is, are you saying I'm overdue? So has this guy been betting Black 13 too much here, you think, Sean?
Well, I never want to be the purveyor of any doom and gloom, so I won't. But it really comes down to that one time. You have that one bad experience, and hopefully it's limited to maybe a single drive, but boy, it'd be terrible if your whole data center got wiped out just to save a couple of dollars on a drive. So I mean, it's ultimately up to the end consumer, George, of how well they want to sleep at night, or how valuable their data is to them. And there's no necessary clock that's going to run out on them, but if your data is important to you, you should spend the money to secure it.
Yeah, and I think what it's interesting is it's really the nature of the business. If your business is such that wringing every dollar out of IT makes a big difference, then it makes a lot of sense to kind of look at this type of technology, and I don't mean that like that's some extreme weird use case. There are clearly businesses whose product is essentially IT or some form of IT, and so looking at that, it makes sense. So it just depends on the situation. Let's see, Sean, we've got another one here. Well, they're basically asking about your Storage Peak 1000 management tool, but let me read the whole thing. My storage needs used to be much less than they are now, and the data sets keep growing. Can you talk about the Storage Peak 1000 management tool?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, and that's a typical case, isn't it? Everything started off a little smaller, and you were restricted to a couple of megabytes of storage space back in the day, and you had to manage that very carefully of how much you were going to use. But as data sets keep growing, applications keep growing, the level of detail that's required, let's say in a manufacturing environment, using like an application that's it's expecting to write huge amounts of data every time you update it, all the levels of detail of the product that you're designing. You need some pretty large storage space, which means that your storage environment is going to scale out. I mean, this is all part of the world we live in. Everything keeps growing. Nothing seems to want to shrink. You download photos from your camera now. You upload them to Facebook. I don't know if you ever go back and look at them again, but it doesn't matter. Somebody might, and you're not going to delete them, and so you keep them there. And so wherever they're stored, whoever's looking after that database has to keep scaling with you and the millions of others that are taking photos and videos of their cats all day long. And you've got to be able to manage that infrastructure and know how to best deploy the storage that you have. And so Storage Peak 1000 is something we provide for free with our enterprise class products. And it's really designed to monitor and management of your entire system. It gives you the opportunity for that IT manager to sit in the comfy of their own cubicle and centrally monitor all the deployment of the either Sabre drives or any of our enterprise class products. It's just a web-based GUI, and the network's accessible to enable either Linux, Windows, etc. You're providing a whole cross-platform view of all the SSDs that are connected to your servers, storage arrays, appliances, and it really includes a user configurable alerting system. And it will tell you, here's the drive that is going down, or there's an issue with it, and you have an opportunity to address that before it becomes a real issue.
Yeah, exactly. So, Sean, we have time for a few more questions, so I'll let you go ahead and prioritize a couple more. While Sean's doing that, we've got just our contact information up on the screen there. So our website's up there, my email address, OCZ's information, and our various Twitter handles and YouTube pages as well. So feel free to reach out to us by any of those measures. Let's see, Sean. I have SSDs in my it's kind of the opposite question. I have SSDs in my servers, but not consumer drives. Things are okay. Should I switch to one of the new drives like Sabre 1000?
Sure. Why not? Really, it's really up to the end customer, and OCZ also provides excellent client solutions as well. But I think if you're really going to be deploying larger numbers of drives, George, I think that's when you'd want to be considering the Sabre 1000 for that, as opposed to maybe our Vector or Vertex series of client drives.
Okay, great. So I think we've covered both ends of that, right? The what do you do if you have only been using client? What have you been doing if you've only using enterprise? And really, the answer is about the same. It really depends on your environment, and use the right drive at the right time. I think what you're looking for in this 1000 class type, or the Sabre 1000 class product, is something that's much more read intensive, and then those work very well. Let's see. Here's another one in. What kind of features should they be looking for in an enterprise controller? And then also, I think they're looking for the question is looking for some more information about the write intensive drives. What are the numbers for that?
Oh yeah, sure. I don't know if you're not going to be buying the components of the drive itself. So really, you have to look at the specifications for what you think you need it to do. So a controller specifically is going to look after the drive itself. So you can definitely head over to OCZ.com and tiptoe through all of our products, both enterprise and client, including Sabre. And all the specs are there. There's product briefs and data sheets to provide all that additional information to help you dial in what type of drive and the controller that goes with it for your specific application needs. And certainly the ability to then send questions in on that site as well if there's anything specific you need help with. And our operators are standing by to assist as needed.
Okay. All right. Sean, we probably have time for one more question. So I'll let you kind of look at the set that we have remaining and pick one there. And while Sean's doing that, I'll remind everybody that we've got our ratings section that we'd like you to participate in as you leave. Again, 1 being not so great, 5 being great. There's a feedback section there that you can put additional comments in. If you can't think of what to put in there, what I always suggest is, give us some topics for our next webinar. Some of our best webinars come from our listeners, so please put a topic in there, and we'll do it, or a podcast or something on it. So yeah, any suggestions for subjects there is always very helpful. So Sean, why don't you take us home with this one? And I was hoping this was the one you'd prioritize, because I think this kind of gets to the heart of it. Are you saying OCZ is putting their enterprise controller or enterprise power protection into this drive? Sounds like you're just selling an enterprise drive for less dollars. Is that true?
Well, I don't want to take the fifth. No, I mean, really, we've got we do have our full class of enterprise drives, and that's the Intrepid series. And they're designed with the feature set that you need for that type of database. If we were just going to drop the price, we wouldn't have gone to the trouble of making an entire new series. So this drive is really designed from the ground up, the Sabre 1000, that is, to be the drive that we want to target for those gray areas. So the larger deployments, where there's a lot of read-intensive applications in play. And so we've designed a product that we believe fits that market. And we're hoping that webinars such as this and gets the word out, and customers take a look at our website and see what the value is and give it a try. So let us know what you think.
So the net is there's clearly a difference between the two drives, and one is designed for a more mixed workload with higher write activity, and these drives are really designed for a more, I don't want to say a write once, but write seldom, read heavy type of environment. Is that a fair way to summarize?
That's correct. And as you'll see on our website there, we actually use different controllers for each of the class of enterprise drives that we have. So the Barefoot 3 that we use is our own internal homegrown one, and we use another controller for our Intrepid series, which was based off of a Marvell design. So I mean, there are different functions and features that are in those two classes of enterprise drives. But again, Sabre 1000 is designed from the ground up to service these type of hyperscale deployments.
Okay. Well, great. Sean, thanks very much for joining us on the webinar today.
Great. Thanks, George. Thanks for having me, and thanks all for listening.
And again, the contact information is up on the screen there. Feel free to reach out to either of us through any of the channels that we have listed there. If we didn't get to your question, we'll try to answer it offline. If you have additional questions, feel free to tweet us those. If you're an on-demand viewer and obviously you didn't get to participate in the Q&A section and you have a question, feel free to, again, tweet us or email us that question. And again, one last reminder, if you would go ahead and rate the webinar on your way out, and then put some information in the feedback section. If you can't think of anything to say, just give us an idea for the next webinar. I'd love to say that if we picked your idea, we'll give you a new car, but I couldn't get Sean to pony up for the new car, so we're just going to have to say thanks. Anyway, this is George Crump.
George, Valentine's Day is approaching, and nothing would say I love you like an OCZ SSD.
Well, there you go. There you go. All right. Well, for Sean, I'm George Crump, lead analyst at Storage Switzerland. Thank you for joining us today.